Hi guys, it's Jeff here from outboard-boat.com. This is my first section on outboard and boat maintenance advice. This one I'm just going to be covering fuels and oils. I am going to be doing lots of other advice tips, how-tos, maintenance, what to look for, etc. on your outboards. So this is just the first one on fuels and oils. So the first one, fuels and oils. Make sure you're running at least the minimum octane recommended by the manufacturer. Now, two-stroke motors, outboards always have a minimum recommended octane rating. In New Zealand, our fuel isn't the best. Now, I always run 96, especially in carbureted engines, purely because most manufacturers recommend an 87 RON or a 91 rating. Now, I am 91 fuel. We're probably pretty lucky to be 91. So if I run 96, then I've definitely got a barrier or some octane in reserve. Now also, if your boat has been sitting over the winter period, if you have 91 fuel in it or the minimum octane rating that you're allowed, if you leave it sitting for a couple of months, the octane level will drop and will quite possibly be below the minimum rating that you should have. So if you run 96 or premium or the higher octane fuel, when it's sitting and it does drop, you know that you've always got enough octane in reserve so that you're not going to do any damage to your motor. This is what a lean out looks like. This is lean out or detonation. Now detonation, as you can see, the top of the piston has burnt a hole right through it. Now detonation is when the combustion chamber of the motor gets too hot, and basically the fuel starts pre-igniting before it should, and the combustion temperatures go skyrocket through the roof and literally burn a hole in the top of the piston. This can be from running octane level too low, not enough of a fuel mixture in the combustion chamber, or running poor quality fuel. So make sure that you do have the correct octane level. Basically, octane is the resistance to detonation. So the higher the octane of the fuel, the slower it burns, and the more it's going to counteract the effects of detonation, or hopefully stop it happening altogether. So if you're going to be storing your boat over the winter, or if you're not going to be using it for a month or so, now it's best to top the fuel, store the fuel tank topped up completely to the top of the tank. Now what this does is it takes all of the air out of the fuel tank. So the less air that you've got in the fuel tank, the less that it's going to get condensation. Condensation only happens when you've got air in the tank. So if you fill the tank right up to the top, then you're not going to get condensation. Now what you do want to do when you fill the tank to the top is use a good octane fuel, but also put a fuel stabilizer in the fuel. Now what stabilizer does is it keeps the fuel fresh for longer. So if your fuel would normally only last 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 5, you put a stabilizer in it and it can stretch it out to months. So definitely, if you're not going to be using the boat over the winter time, top the fuel right to the top with good octane fuel and add the stabilizer. Now you can get stabilizer from any outboard manufacturer, should carry it. I think the Johnson or Evinrude stabilizer is 2+4. Mercury did their own one as well, so it shouldn't be hard to come by. You probably expect to spend about $11 on it. Now after the winter time, you should check your fuel filter, your water separator in the boat, drain it and check for any water contamination. If you've got water contamination, drain the filter, do it back up, prime the fuel through again, and keep draining it until you know that you've got clean fuel coming through with no water in it. Once you've got clean fuel with no water, replace the filter, because the water can break down the element in the filter. Also, just on the subject of fuel and oils, check your fuel lines and connectors for damage, for perishing to the fuel lines or damage to the O-rings. Now if you've got damaged O-rings, what can happen is it can leak air into the system. You might not have a fuel leak, but you can have air leaks into it. So with a split O-ring causing an air leak, it can create a lean mixture which can cause this detonation. So make sure that your fuel connectors are always greased, so that when you're putting them on and off, not too much grease so that it blocks it, but just enough so that when you're sliding the connector on and off, it doesn't pinch or grab the O-ring. Now oils, make sure that you're using the correct oil stated by the manufacturer. If it's a carbureted 2-stroke, normally it's TCW3. Now it must be a marine TCW3 oil. A normal 2-stroke lawnmower oil or similar isn't going to be good enough, because it doesn't have the additives for the anti-corrosion factor. I mean, outboards They live in a harsh environment. They use them in water, salt water, left outside, so they have corrosion inhibitors and stuff in them to stop the internals rusting on your motor. You need to find out if your motor is carbureted or direct injection. If it's a direct injected or an EFI engine, you don't want to be running just a normal carbureted oil. Manufacturers, again, they create oils for the motors, so if it's for instance, a Mercury Optimax oil, you have to run the DFI oil on these, because the air injectors on the motor can carbon them up if you're using the wrong oil, and you can have the wrong air fuel mixture that way. Or E-Tech or Evinrude direct injected engines, the injectors directly into the combustion chamber, so those injectors can carbon up the oil, have additives in them to stop the carboning on those injectors. Now, your oil bottle in the boat, don't chop and change your oil brands, don't mix oils, stick with one oil. So if you've got Valvoline oil, for instance, keep using Valvoline. If you can't buy that Valvoline oil, what you want to do is get another oil that you know that you can purchase easily, and you want to run the oil bottle right down low in the boat. If you can, drain it out and clean the oil bottle, and then top it up with the fresh oil and continue running that oil. Now, the reason for this is if you chop and change with the oils and mix different brands together, they can sludge. They can react and cause a sludge in the oil bottle. Now, what this will do is it will block your pickup, or it will block your oil pump, or it will block the lines, or it just won't be good quality oil getting into your engine, so you can create oiling problems. Now, this is a piston that has failed due to sludgy oil. I actually serviced this boat, came in for a service. It had a running problem. Compression check found that it was down on compression. Pulled it apart and found this piston. Now, inspecting it, that basically went over the whole motor. The water pump was fine. The alarm system was all working. It was an oil problem. So looking at the boat, draining the oil tank, found a lot of sludge in the oil bottle itself, which had created this issue. Now, talking to the customer, he had been mixing different brands. He went to the petrol station and he just bought whatever oil the petrol station had, or when he was out and he saw an oil bottle on special, he would buy it, and this was the result of that. So whatever money he saved by buying the oil on special cost him tenfold when it blew his engine up. One more thing on oils is monitor your oil usage. Now, two strokes normally run about 50 to 1 as a rule of thumb. Yamahas run probably 200 to 1 at idle, but then at full speed or full throttle, the oil injection system will increase to about 50 to 1. So if you're pre-mixing your fuel, you should be pre-mixing it at 50 to 1. Now, a good way to monitor it is every time you go out and your boat uses roughly 100 litres of petrol. Now, 50 to 1, 100 litres of petrol is 2 litres of oil. So you should be marking your oil bottle when you go out, go for your run, come back in, work out how much fuel you've used, and top the oil back up to the mark that you put on it before you went, and know how much oil you've used. So you can work out, 50 to 1 works out at 2%. So if you've used 100 litres of petrol, you should go through 2 litres of oil. If you've used 50 litres of petrol, you should go through 1 litre of oil. So if you're not using around that 2% oil, you should really get your motor booked into an outboard specialist, have an oil consumption test done on it. It's going to save you a whole lot of hassle. It might be fine, you might just being overcautious, but hey, the half an hour spent to get an oil consumption test done could save you a lot of money in the long run by not having an oil related failure. Alright, so that's it on oils and fuels for this time. So check that, make sure that you're using the correct fuel, the right octane, fresh fuel. Make sure you've got a good water separator fitted. You're not leaving it sitting over winter time and then just using it straight off the bat. You should always check for water in your fuel. And then with your oils, make sure you're using the correct oil. Make sure you've got carbureted oil or direct injection oil. Don't mix your brands. You should regularly check your oil bottle for sludging. All you need to do is when you're filling it up, take the cap off it, tilt the oil bottle away from the filler hole, so that you can see the bottom of the tank, bottom of the oil bottle. Any sludging will sit in the bottom. It will look like little bubbles, so just keep an eye out for that, and monitor your oil usage. So roughly 2%, so 100 litres of petrol, 2 litres of oil, 50 to 1 is the max. For any more advice, just keep an eye out for my videos, or you can visit outboard-boat.com and you can subscribe to my newsletter, and I will be mailing out weekly tips, and you can also ask me questions to post videos on. So visit that, outboard-boat.com, and I'll see you next time.